Penguin Audio presents Broken Government: How Republican Rule Destroyed the Legislative, Executive, and Judicial Branches by John W. Dean. Read by Paul Michael. It has been frequently remarked that it seems to have been reserved to the people of this country, by their conduct and example, to decide the important question whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force. Alexander Hamilton, Federalist No. 1. Preface. This book completes an unplanned trilogy addressing post-Watergate Republican rule in Washington. When I first started to write about problems with the Bush administration, I had no idea they would keep growing. As they continued, so has my writing. While working on the prior two books, Worse Than Watergate, The Secret Presidency of George W. Bush, 2004, and Conservatives Without Conscience, 2006, it became clear, at least to me, that Republicans had learned little about abusing power in the ways that ultimately destroyed the Nixon presidency. Given my familiarity with that now mostly forgotten history, I find it astonishing that the Republican Party has actively incorporated such an undemocratic mentality into its governing philosophy, and in the process turned once conventional conservative thinking about congressional, presidential, and judicial powers upside down and then sideways. More strikingly, it has gotten away with it, although it seems a reckoning may finally have come. In the pages that follow, drawing on findings of my earlier works, but viewing their subject matter in a far broader context, I examine the troubling consequences of this new Republican way of thinking. It has been new on Capitol Hill since about 1997, about 3 years after the GOP regained control of the House. It has been new to the White House since 2001, with the arrival of George W. Bush and Richard B. Cheney, although its roots first emerged during the Nixon presidency and began blossoming in the Reagan and Bush senior years. This is not a how-to book, nor is it prescriptive, but rather a heads-up account about the way Republicans behave when in power. Rational thinking Americans should hope that the 2008 presidential election confronts the need to repair the government, rather than adopts agendas or selects candidates bound to produce more damage. It is that hope that prompted my writing this book at this time, and I plan to do as much as I can to raise awareness of these issues with voters and candidates, for they simply cannot be ignored. In Worse Than Watergate, I pointed out striking parallels between Bush's governing style and Nixon's, focusing particularly on the use of excessive and unnecessary secrecy by both presidencies, along with the resulting consequences. Given my involvement in Nixon's presidency, not to mention its undoing with Watergate, I recognized early in the Bush administration exactly the same mindset that had caused such havoc 30 years earlier. I had no doubt that this mentality would result in a calamity of some sort, which, in fact, it has done. Asserting, then, that Bush's presidency was worse than Nixon's has proven, in any case, to be an understatement, for it has proven to be much, much worse. Suffice it to say that no one died, nor was anyone tortured, because of Nixon's so-called Watergate abuses of power. In Conservatives Without Conscience, I sought to explain the reasons that conservatives govern as they do, callously and ruthlessly, and why loyal conservative followers are so compliant with the wishes of their leaders. I focused my study on the conservative disposition in the Republican-controlled Congress, along with that in the conservative rank and file of the grand old party, all of whom acquiesced in Bush and Cheney's actions, regardless of how offensive they were to their own core beliefs. Social scientists, I discovered, have been studying such compliant followers, as well as aggressive and dominating leaders, for decades, whom they call authoritarians. Surprisingly, studies of authoritarianism, which are based on a half-century of empirical testing, had not been presented for general readers. Accordingly, with the assistance of Bob Altemeyer, one of the leading researchers in the field, I explored this research
Sample complete. Ready to continue?